Hello and welcome to a brand new video on my channel. Today I'm excited to present part 19 of Pandora and the Eternal War. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share my channel with your friends. But I won't keep you waiting any longer. Let's dive straight into the story. What are they doing there? Dr. Walter asked as he stared at the projection before him. The smaller figure turned its gaze upward, and in that instant, a bone-chilling shiver ran down Walter's spine. The analysts in the room felt it too. A creeping sense of unease settled over them as a horrifying thought took root in their minds. Could she see the drone? It was absurd. It had to be impossible. They wanted to dismiss it outright, to rationalize it away. But then, she raised her hand and pointed directly at the drone. "Did you enjoy the show, heroes?" she asked, her voice carrying an eerie amusement. Dr. Walter's mind raced. Could this be some kind of misinterpretation? A coincidence? He turned to the AI for confirmation, hoping, praying, that there had been some kind of error. But the answer he received was anything but comforting. "There is a 98% probability that those were her exact words," the AI reported with its typical mechanical precision. Additionally, lip movement analysis indicates a high likelihood of natural articulation. Walter swallowed hard. The way her lips had moved, the way her expression had formed, it had been unmistakably human. Then, without warning, the larger of the two figures raised a hand. "We've lost control of the drone," the AI stated matter-of-factly. Panic erupted in the control room. There was no denying it now. She could see the drone. She had known it was there the entire time. But they forced themselves to calm down. After all, they were safe. It was just a drone, a replaceable machine, nothing more. Still, the implications were staggering. No one in the room could comprehend how this was possible. Controlling or even manipulating chaos energy was considered beyond human capability. And yet, they were witnessing it with their own eyes. "Do we have an audio feed? Can we hear what they're saying?" Walter asked. A moment later, the speakers crackled to life. The first voice was distorted, female, but intentionally altered, its edges blurred. "Why should I bother taking the drone? If we take it with us, they'll be able to track us," the voice said. "That doesn't matter," the second voice responded. This one deeper, male at first, but shifting midway into something distinctly feminine. "The boss wants them to see what we're doing. Besides, it's not like they can stop us from harvesting chaos. The humans are too preoccupied with villains and vampires. There's no way they could possibly monitor every single chaos zone across the world. No matter what they do, no matter what we do, there's no feasible way for them to prevent us from collecting chaos. To stop us, they'd have to station guards in every chaos zone around the clock." A pause. Then, with a smirk audible in their tone, they added, "So it doesn't matter. We might as well give them a little scare." "That's risky. But I have to admit, it would push our plans forward," the first voice replied. "Shall we continue, Astralis?" "Why not?" The second figure, Astralis, chuckled, this time in the voice of a child. "Somewhere else would be nice, though. These humans are getting annoying." "Very well, then. This way, my dear," the first figure said. A tear in reality split open just inches above the ground. Now that the camera was close, the spectacle was breathtaking. Gasps filled the control room. At first, the air shimmered, like the surface of a heat mirage. Then, a fracture appeared, like a crack in glass, as though something invisible had been struck from the other side. A moment later, the fracture spread, branching outward. The edges of the rift ignited with a swirling glow of violet, lilac, and faint turquoise flames. The most disturbing part? The rift truly resembled shattered glass, except it wasn't in glass. It was in the air itself. If one focused on the edges of the rift, it seemed almost three-dimensional. And yet before their eyes, the first pieces of reality itself began falling away, swallowed by the black abyss beyond. A heartbeat later, ripples cascaded across the portal's surface, and the last remnants of the shattered reality crumbled into the void. The rift had stabilized, 2 meters tall, 1 meter wide. In the endless darkness beyond, a single violet sun flickered ominously. The taller figures stepped through first, their forms stretching impossibly as if being pulled into infinity, like something caught in the event horizon of a black hole. But unlike true spaghettification, this appeared neither painful nor unpleasant. If anything, it looked graceful, almost elegant in its unnaturalness. Moments later, Astralis followed, stepping through the void and emerging in a different chaos zone. Do you see this, heroes? Astralis' voice echoed through the speakers. Isn't this place beautiful? She held up the drone. Oh, and I decided to bring this little thing along to show you how useless your efforts truly are. In case you haven't realized yet, we can go wherever we want. A giggle? Good luck trying to find us. And with that, Astralis crushed the drone. The last image transmitted back to the control room was a burst of turquoise flames. The reinforced metal frame of the drone melted within seconds, disintegrating like wax under a blowtorch. Data flooded the monitors. Correction, the AI reported neutrally. The flames reached an exact temperature of 4,560 degrees Celsius. Walter groaned, rubbing his temples. He muted the AI. He needed a drink. No, he needed a strong drink. Grabbing a bottle of wine, he poured himself a glass and downed it in a single gulp. It barely helped. He exhaled sharply, steeling himself before stepping back into the chaotic storm of voices that had erupted in the control room. It took 15 minutes to restore order. Then, amidst the murmuring, someone muttered, "Wait a second. I've seen flames like that before." Walter's head snapped toward the speaker. "What did you just say?" The man, a thin, wiry analyst who practically shrank under Walter's gaze, hesitated, swallowing nervously. His hands trembled as he pulled up a file on his computer. It was an unsolved case. The Helios Hero Academy massacre. The only witness? Pandora. According to her report, the flames at the scene had been a brilliant white-blue turquoise color, scorchingly hot, exactly like what they had just seen. A connection, a direct link between Astralis and the Academy incident. That didn't necessarily mean Astralis was the culprit, but if it wasn't her, it was likely someone related to her. The realization sent a ripple of dread through the room, and if that wasn't enough, the fact that these villains wanted them to see all of this, wanted them to witness their power, meant only one thing. They weren't afraid. And that, more than anything, was terrifying. As Walter and his team from the Department of Villain Suppression and Catastrophe Prevention were discussing the motivations of the two individuals who called themselves the Constellations, the door suddenly burst open. "Sir Walter, urgent news for you," said a man in a black suit wearing sunglasses and an earpiece. His bald head reflected the room's artificial light. Dr. Walter frowned, unsure what could be so pressing. But then, the man spoke words that made his stomach tighten. "Sir, it's about Vasilia Nova. She has agreed to speak with you and Sky Lightville." Walter froze. He wasn't sure whether this situation truly required his attention more than his current work. Meeting with one of the most dangerous individuals in the world? That was not something to take lightly. A sense of unease settled in his chest. He had never truly understood how things had come to this. How had his own wife, his beloved wife, whom he had cherished with all his heart, become one of the world's most infamous villains? For over a century, she had been wanted, and as far as anyone knew, she was immortal. The reason no one had ever been able to kill her was terrifyingly simple. Upon her death, all the energy she had stored inside her would be released at once. And since no one knew exactly how much energy she had accumulated over the years, she was essentially a walking bomb. Walter swallowed hard, the thought of her containment bringing to mind Illyrium, the most secure prison ever built. It had been constructed specifically to hold beings like her. Vasilia Nova was one of the 20 most powerful individuals on the planet, and even that was an understatement. The man cleared his throat, pulling Walter from his thoughts. "It would be beneficial if you agreed to speak with her. We still have no idea how her ability truly works or who she was in contact with before her capture. There are many unanswered questions. But, as you know, we cannot force her to talk." Walter studied the insignia on the man's uniform. He was a high-ranking officer of the Heroes Association. "Don't worry about your current duties," the man continued. "Someone else will handle them temporarily. But we believe you and Sky Lightville are the two people she is most likely to speak with." Those words shattered the last remnants of Walter's hesitation. A mixture of fear and curiosity swirled inside him. He had his own questions, questions only she could answer. So he followed the man through the security corridors of the building until they reached the helipad. The helicopter waiting for them was sleek and futuristic, with four powerful rotors that hummed to life with an almost eerie silence as they lifted off. Illyrium was a prison built in the middle of the ocean, far from the mainland, to prevent any chance of escape. More importantly, it had been constructed in one of the lowest energy zones they could find. The surrounding sea was bitterly cold, and as far as the eye could see, there was nothing but endless water. Without the superpowers of the facility's director and the pilot, reaching this place at all would have been nearly impossible. The prison itself had multiple layers of security, but the most crucial measure? The energy vacuum surrounding the cell of the most dangerous inmate in the entire facility. Very few villains in history had ever been classified as a level 10 threat. That designation meant that there was no known way to kill or stop them if they ever escaped. The only reason Vasilia had been contained for the past 25 years was that her powers did not provide resistance to mental abilities. Aside from that, she was unstoppable. Walter clenched his fists, his mind swirling with doubt. Why? He thought bitterly. Why did she pretend to love me for so long? What did she gain from it? She's over 100 years old, so what was the point of it all? The salty air filled his lungs as he stepped out of the helicopter. The metallic walkway beneath his feet led toward the colossal, black fortress that loomed ahead like an impenetrable monolith. The sheer presence of Illyrium was suffocating. It was designed to keep the most powerful threats locked away forever. But standing before it, Walter couldn't shake the feeling that he was the one stepping into a cage. The pilot escorted him toward a heavy steel door embedded in the massive metal walls. The entire prison gleamed under the gray sky, an oppressive monument to the world's fears. Walter's pulse quickened. Soon he would see her again. And yet, the thought terrified him. He wasn't sure what frightened him more, the fact that she was one of the most dangerous beings alive, or the answers she might give him. What little they knew about her was fragmented at best. They were certain she could use energy to maintain her youth. They also knew she could survive indefinitely without food, but she actively used her power only to prevent aging. And most unsettling of all, she refused to eat anything that wasn't luxurious or gourmet. That fact alone was disturbing. Because, theoretically, if she starved herself to the point of death, she would release all her stored energy at once, causing a catastrophic explosion. And yet, there had been a time when she had done exactly that. There was a period when she had refused to eat or drink for several days, bringing herself to the brink of death. The incident had proven one thing. She was as stubborn as she was terrifying. And now, after all these years, she had even learned to control her self-destruction. Walter's stomach twisted into knots. If she couldn't be killed, because she would instantly detonate upon death, and if no one knew how much energy she still contained, then what options did they truly have? Wait a moment. Walter suddenly frowned. If she holds that much power inside her, how did we even manage to imprison her? As they made their way through the prison's corridors, they passed through multiple layers of security. Every few moments, they had to stop at heavily fortified gates that required high-clearance access codes to proceed. Walter remained silent, though his mind was filled with questions. Finally, the man beside him spoke, his tone grave. Everything I'm about to tell you is classified. You must not share this information with anyone. Walter nodded, bracing himself. The truth is, Vasilia currently holds almost no energy within her body. Walter's eyes widened. All of our security measures are in place to prevent her from absorbing any large amounts of energy. The only reason she remains ageless is because we allow her just enough to stop the aging process. Walter exhaled sharply, his thoughts racing. Then why go through all these extreme security measures? He asked, though part of him already knew the answer. If Vasilia truly had no energy left, if she was nothing more than an aging immortal kept alive by scraps of power, why had they locked her away in the most secure prison in existence? The man beside him, his escort, adjusted his earpiece before responding. Because we don't understand how her ability works. His voice was steady, but there was a tension beneath it. What we do know is that when we captured her, she had almost no usable energy left. If she had been at full strength, We wouldn't have stood a chance. Walter frowned. And the only reason she was captured at all was because she isn't immune to mental superpowers. Exactly, the man confirmed. Without that weakness, no force in the world could have restrained her. But even with her energy reserves depleted, we know she still holds an unimaginable amount of power within her. The problem is, she doesn't, or perhaps can't use it. If she could, she would have broken out long ago. Walter let that sink in. So you're saying she has a massive energy reserve, but it's inactive? That's one possibility, the escort admitted. Or maybe it's a type of energy she simply can't tap into for anything other than self-destruction. And that's the real problem. We don't know. What we do know is that when she nears the threshold of detonating, her body begins to crack apart, glowing with energy. If she doesn't stop the process herself, she explodes. Walter felt a chill run down his spine. And you're certain of this? The man gave him a grim nod. It's one of the first prophecies Sky ever made. Walter inhaled sharply. The Oracle. Sky Lightville's ability allowed her to see possible futures, glimpsing threads of fate before they unraveled. If she had foreseen Vasilia's death, then it meant there was no doubt about the outcome. And you trust her visions? Walter pressed. As much as we trust gravity to keep us on the ground, the escort replied. She has never been wrong about a confirmed future. The moment Vasilia dies, the explosion is inevitable. No force in this world can stop it. Walter didn't respond. There was nothing more to say. They walked in silence, the cold, sterile corridors stretching endlessly before them. Finally, they arrived at the final door. Sky is already inside, the escort informed him. She's waiting with Vasilia. The man placed his hand on the sensor, his palm pressing against the smooth surface. A faint shimmer surrounded his skin, a barely perceptible glow, more a suggestion of light than anything tangible. There was no grand display, no crackling energy or dramatic surge of power, just a quiet, steady glow that flickered for a second before the system accepted his unique signature. Dr. Walter's sharp eyes narrowed slightly, a signature lock. That explained the elaborate security. This door would only open for those who had been personally authorized, with a biological imprint unique enough to bypass any potential forgery. With a deep mechanical groan, the massive metal door split apart, its heavy structure gliding seamlessly into the floor and ceiling, revealing the chamber beyond. Walter stepped inside. Even before the door sealed behind him, he noticed the tension in the guards standing outside. They were stiff, their hands twitching ever so slightly toward their weapons. The kind of body language that betrayed nervous anticipation. Ignoring them, Walter took a seat at the cold metal table. The room was stark, clinical, nothing but steel walls and an eerie silence that pressed against his ears like static. Across from him sat a woman with long, dark brown hair and turquoise eyes, her pale skin giving her a sickly, almost ghostly appearance. Sky Lightville. She looked unwell, her energy drained by the constant burden of her abilities. And then there was the woman sitting across from them, Vasilia Nova. Even after 25 years of captivity, she looked as proud and regal as ever. Her shoulder-length robin-red hair framed her sharp, striking features, her violet eyes holding the same intensity they had all those years ago. She had always been a vision of power, and that had not changed. Her pale skin contrasted against the soft fabric of the simple summer dress she wore, an outfit that would have seemed casual on anyone else, but, on her, felt almost like a defiance of the sterile walls around her. Between them, a nearly invisible force field flickered occasionally, separating the space with an energy barrier. And within that, a second layer of containment, the energy vacuum. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Walter could see how it wrapped around Vasilia's form like an intangible cocoon. It held her suspended just above the chair, preventing her from touching anything, from even making physical contact with the world outside. Her entire body was enveloped, a thin membrane of energy, ensuring that even the ambient forces around her couldn't be fully neutralized, but nearly all of it was siphoned away. She was trapped in stillness. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Walter wasn't sure where to begin. Now that he knew the truth, now that he understood the secrets she had kept from him, everything felt different. Vasilia's violet eyes met his, and despite the coldness in them, he could see something else beneath the surface. Regret. I missed you, Walter. she said, her voice smooth but carrying the weight of time. Walter exhaled through his nose, folding his arms. Funny way of showing it. A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. I suppose it is. Sky remained silent, watching with an unreadable expression. You lied to me, Walter said finally. His voice quieter than he expected. You kept all of this from me. Why? Vasilia's expression didn't change. Because it was for you. Walter scoffed, shaking his head. For me. He leaned forward slightly, his tone sharpening. How does slaughtering countless people protect me? Vasilia tilted her head, as if the question genuinely puzzled her. Then, with an elegant shrug, she answered, they were in the way. Walter's stomach twisted. In the way of what? My happiness. There was no hesitation in her voice. No remorse. It wasn't arrogance, it wasn't even cruelty. Just a simple, unshakable certainty. Walter studied her, searching for something, anything, that could make him understand. You talk like they were obstacles. Like they weren't people. They weren't, Vasilia said, her gaze steady. Not to me. Walter clenched his jaw. I don't expect you to understand, she continued, tilting her head slightly. Heroes, villains, you pretend you're different from one another. But you're not. The only difference is who wins in the end. Walter said nothing. Vasilia leaned forward slightly, though the energy vacuum kept her from touching the table. But what you should understand, Walter, is that my love for you has never changed. There was something frightening about the way she said it. As if it were the most natural thing in the world. As if her love justified everything. Walter ran a hand down his face, exhaling. You're over 100 years old, Vasilia. Why are we even having this conversation? She chuckled softly. Because you're still the only one who ever mattered to me. Dr. Walter narrowed his eyes, the weight of unspoken questions pressing heavily against his mind. How had it come to this? Why him, of all people? And more than anything, why had she fallen for him in the first place? The answers eluded him, slipping through his grasp like sand in a storm. Dr. Walter, please proceed with the questions we have provided, a voice echoed through the sterile chamber, snapping him from his thoughts. It wasn't coming from her. It was disembodied, artificial, projected through some unseen speaker system embedded within the cold walls. Walter barely reacted, schooling his expression into neutrality. But Vasilia noticed. Of course, she did. She had always been perceptive in ways that unsettled him. The slight curve of her lips told him she was amused by his attempts at composure, though the effect wasn't quite what it once had been. The ease, the familiarity, they were no longer there. I take it they're whispering into your ear, she mused, her tone laced with amusement. No matter. I suppose I'm ready to answer a few questions. Walter exhaled through his nose, shifting slightly in his chair. Then let's start with the obvious. Why me? You could have chosen anyone else to manipulate, to use for whatever grand design you had. Why did it have to be me? His voice carried an edge, tension curling around each word. Vasilia tilted her head, her violet eyes calm, unshaken. I know it's difficult to understand, she admitted, her voice softer than he expected. But I love you. I always have. I only hope that our children are well. Walter felt his pulse quicken. This was what he feared most, that no matter what choices were made, the cycle would never end. He stared at Vasilia, at the woman he had once known, and wondered if there was anything left of her at all. Please ask her who she allied with and who Legacy is. A male voice whispered into Dr. Walter's ear, only audible to him. He couldn't tell whether it was a superpower from one of the guards or some unknown technology, but ultimately, it didn't matter. He pushed his emotions and personal questions aside, focusing instead on Vasilia. You said you'd answer a few questions, so I suppose I should start, Walter said, his tone steady. Yes, why not? It's dreadfully boring in here. Go ahead, my dear. But are our children well? Vasilia asked, her voice smooth, almost casual. They are, but I don't see why that would matter to you, Walter countered, his expression hardening. You betrayed us. You wiped out an entire criminal syndicate. Yes, I killed them, and I don't regret it. Vasilia's violet eyes remained unfazed. They tried to harm our daughter, so I took everything from them. But you already knew that. Then why are you even answering questions now? You've never done so before without demanding something in return, Walter pressed, deliberately repeating part of what the voice in his ear had instructed him to say. It's simple. I wanted to see you. And I want something that lets me watch the news, Vasilia replied nonchalantly. If this simulation keeps up, I'll kill myself out of sheer boredom. She said it so matter-of-factly, without the slightest hesitation, that it sent a chill down Walter's spine. He wanted to call it a lie, but he could no longer tell what she was thinking. It was entirely possible that she truly would end her own life out of nothing more than boredom. You have no idea how dull it is to serve a sentence 45 times your natural lifespan. On top of that, I have absolutely no way to escape. And the surveillance is absolutely ridiculous. They watch me shower. That is, when they actually allow me to do it once a month. She rolled her eyes before continuing, but I get it. After all, I am one of the most dangerous people in the world. How can you so easily wipe out all those lives without even blinking? Walter asked, his voice heavy. I thought you wanted to know about legacy, Vasilia said, tilting her head slightly. But fine, it's a long story anyway. I take it this generation of heroes and humans has completely forgotten how our era began over 1,300 years ago. What am I saying? Of course they've forgotten, lost in the endless wars we keep waging against each other. She sighed, running a hand through her long, crimson hair. After a brief pause, she said, I'll tell you, but only if you grant me something to entertain myself with. I mean it. I will kill myself if I have to endure this boredom for another week. And I don't need to say that this also applies if I sense that I'm being sedated or otherwise manipulated. Her tone remained frighteningly indifferent. But why would you do something like that? Walter asked, frowning. Because my life is the only thing I have left. I have no privacy, no dignity, nothing. So yes, if I am forced to endure this much longer, I will end it. Silence hung between them for a moment before Walter finally spoke again. The higher-ups will have to consider it, but, with certain security precautions, we may be able to provide you with something. Okay then, Vasilia exhaled, settling into her chair. I'll tell you the story. She took a deep breath before continuing. First of all, let me just say, the calendar is utter nonsense. The first superpowers appeared about 1,500 years ago. But even I can't say exactly when. Those early days were more than just chaotic. The way she casually implied that she was over 1,500 years old felt almost absurd. Yet, she didn't seem to care how her two visitors reacted. How are you over 1,000 years old? Walter asked, skepticism in his voice. I'm not, Vasilia said with a smirk. But my father was from that early era of superpowers. That's why I'm as strong as I am. I possess an original superpower. There was a rare flicker of nostalgia in her voice. And what does that have to do with legacy? Walter pressed, still trying to make sense of it all. Ah, I'm getting to that. Back in those days, less than 1% of the human population had superpowers. And those powers weren't classified into ranks like they are today. Instead, there were original superpowers and weaker ones. How should I put this? Ah, yes. The strongest abilities were considered original superpowers, and everything else, abilities that descended from them, were viewed as lesser. And what's the difference between an original superpower and a normal one? Walter asked. Original superpowers are inherited recessively, while normal ones are dominant. That means both of my parents had to possess an original superpower for me to have one, too. On the other hand, it also means that if you have an original superpower, every child you have is guaranteed to be born with a superpower of some kind. Honestly, even I don't fully understand all of it anymore. But that brings us to legacy, because legacy is an original superpower, Vasilia said, a knowing smile creeping onto her lips. I assume you've come across those idiots who treat legacy as something divine? Has it turned into some kind of religion? Her voice carried an amused curiosity. What is legacy? Walter asked again. As far as I know, it is the power to pass on other abilities and legacy itself. By now, legacy should encompass over 100 different abilities. But don't worry. The bearer of legacy won't be able to use all the abilities they possess because the limitation remains that they must train each power individually, Vasilia said, tilting her head slightly. How do you know about legacy? Asked Sky, who had remained silent until now. It was the power of my ancestors. I was given the opportunity to inherit legacy but refused. That was mostly because I didn't want to take responsibility for all the powers that legacy had accumulated back then. Besides, I don't think I would have been compatible with it. After all, I have an original superpower, Vasilia explained. What else can you tell us about legacy? Walter asked. A little, but I won't. I'm not here to give you a history lesson about it. But don't worry, I strongly believe legacy won't pose a threat. The echoes of its past bearers won't allow that, Vasilia said. Why won't you tell us more about legacy? Sky pressed. Because then I wouldn't have anything left to tell you in the future. You should understand that, Vasilia said. She leaned back and gazed toward the ceiling. Vasilia couldn't quite put the strange feeling in her chest into words. It felt as if something truly interesting was about to happen. If not for this feeling and the hope of speaking with Dr. Walter, she probably would have already stopped her own heart. And then, something happened that even she didn't expect. Where do our superpowers come from? And what is a Chaos Arcanus? Sky suddenly asked. Well, someone has found something interesting, Vasilia said with amusement. I'll just tell you this, chaos is not what you think it is. It is no more evil than a rock. Saying chaos is evil, or that magic is good, is as meaningless as claiming good and evil exist. Light and darkness, these are all ideas shaped by your morally limited human perspectives. They are just thoughts and concepts, but in reality, they carry no true weight. What do you mean by that? Walter asked. Chaos is more than just some wicked violet energy that's hostile to all life. As the name suggests, it is chaotic and difficult to understand, but that doesn't mean it doesn't follow rules. What I mean is that this world is far more colorful than you want to see it. I believe that if humanity stopped slaughtering itself, we might have a chance to end this war. But humans are simply too greedy to stop fighting, Vasilia said casually. This worldview clashed with Walter's own beliefs, but he found it nothing more than naive. He believed that humans needed heroes to maintain order, and to Vasilia, that idea was laughable. She couldn't suppress her laughter when she heard it. She felt it build up in her chest until it burst out of her. What nonsense. I can't believe you actually think that. You truly believe this world needs order or laws. That's hilarious, she said, struggling to speak between fits of laughter. That's complete nonsense. We humans don't matter in this world. You think I'm a threat? Then you should see the real monsters. You believe that someone like me, at X rank, is dangerous? Then you should take a look at the rulers of this world. Even if I gave everything I had, I wouldn't be able to hold them off for even a second. If you think humanity has achieved anything significant, then I have to disappoint you. This is nothing. Our society could vanish in an instant, she said, grinning wildly. Walter already knew she was somewhat unhinged, but he hadn't expected it to be this bad. Yet something in him also told him that there was truth in her words. What would you do if there was a threat that endangered you and everything you love? Sky suddenly asked. That's a good question. I suppose I would try to fight it. And if that wasn't possible, I would either submit or run away. Naturally, I'd try to protect Walter and my children, but if I had no chance of winning, then of course, surrendering and licking my enemy's boots would be an option, Vasilia said nonchalantly. Walter leaned back in his chair, wondering how much of what his wife had just said was actually true. That she had done something cruel and that she was evil, those were undeniable facts. But the part of her that had once loved him, that part did not seem as twisted as he had always believed. He could feel it. However faint, there was still some love left in her for him. Yet, another question gnawed at him. Why had Sky asked those particular questions? He couldn't put his finger on it, but something about them felt significant. Regardless, he could no longer see his wife as he once had. In the underworld, she had many names, but one in particular suited her best. The First Demoness. There is someone with the potential to turn everything upside down, someone who will distort the very foundation of this world. I see futures where everything drowns in a bloodbath. Our world burns. And yet, I see other futures, ones where none of that comes to pass. I cannot say for certain, but you and another person play a role in all of this. Sky spoke with an eerie certainty. What is that supposed to mean, Oracle? Are you asking me to prevent society's downfall? Vasilia asked, laughing again. Yes, you and someone else may play a key role in averting the darkness. Sky responded. You were the one who locked me up here. Why should I trust you? Vasilia's voice was sharp, but then she saw something in her enemy's eyes. Hatred. That much was as clear as ever. But beneath it there was something else. A light, unbroken and unwavering. A hope she herself had long lost. And then a thought crept into Vasilia's mind, one that startled even her. Do I even deserve to be saved? What is wrong with this woman? Why is Sky being so absurdly kind? Could she actually want to save me? How can she be so fundamentally different from me? She is like the sun, and I am something twisted in the night. But why? Why do I feel warmth from her, just like I do from Walter? After a long silence, Vasilia finally spoke. Why? Sky tilted her head slightly. Why what? Why are you the one trying to convince me to help you? Why don't you look at me like you want to kill me? Vasilia asked, her voice betraying her confusion. It's simple. I believe that every person still has a chance to change. You may be a demoness, but even you can change. Sky said, her voice carrying a warmth that cut through the darkness Vasilia had wrapped around her soul. Vasilia studied her carefully. She is dying. I have heard that much. She was the one who locked me away, and yet she is filled with light. Her scars tell me she had a terrible childhood, and still, despite her pain, she is willing to sacrifice herself to save this world. She knows she doesn't have much time left, and yet she spends it talking to me. She does what she believes is right. Why? Why are you the complete opposite of me? You emerged from the darkness stronger, and yet... Vasilia trailed off, unable to grasp the difference between them. I can't answer that, Vasilia, but I can tell you this. It is not too late. The darkness can still be pushed back. A world can be created where no one has to weep anymore, Sky said. Something about those words felt strange to Sky. It wasn't entirely her own voice speaking. That sentence, a world where no one has to weep anymore, hadn't come from her. It had come from the flow of time itself. One of the voices had spoken it, a voice from the future. But she also sensed echoes from the past woven into the moment. Your power is evolving, Sky. You may truly achieve what you set out to do. It is unlikely, but not impossible, Vasilia said, 5 seconds from now. And then the timeline folded upon itself. The choice was made, to not say it out loud. Thank you, Vasilia. The fact that you even considered telling me proves that you are not lost. And yes, I felt it too, Sky responded before Vasilia could even voice her next thought. Vasilia groaned, rolling her eyes. Oh God, I forgot how annoying your powers are, Sky. A cold voice cut through the air. Your time is up. The weight of reality settled back into place. Well then, I suppose we'll see each other again soon. This was a pleasant conversation, Sky said with a small smile. Walter stood abruptly as Sky moved toward the exit. His mind was racing. What the hell was that? What just happened between those two women? As he followed Sky out of the room, he glanced back one last time at one of the most dangerous women in history. His wife. She simply smiled at him. Officially, they had never been married, and they had never been divorced. Unofficially, neither of them had ever signed the divorce papers. So, in a way, one could say they were still husband and wife. And that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Make sure to share my channel with your friends as well. I hope this story was just as exciting for you to listen to as it was for me to tell. If you tap on the left side of the screen, you'll be taken to my latest upload. On the right, you'll find the playlist where you can listen to all parts of this story. And right in the center at the top of the screen, you'll see a link to my YouTube channel where you can check out all my videos. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.